This is our second Live on Live special edition roundtable. And to discuss the presidential election victory of Emmanuel Macron over Marine Le Pen, I'm joined in the studio this afternoon by Olivier Grégoire, who's a strategist with Olicare, and by Jacques Millard, who's a Républicain MP for Yvelines, which is just outside of Paris. Thank you both for coming to the studio today.
Good evening.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. And also, a little later in the program, we're going to be joined on the line by the CEO of Newsmax Media based in Florida, and that's Chris Ruddy. And again, we're going to get another perspective on the French elections from the other side of the Atlantic. Now, in our previous roundtable, a little while back, a little over an hour ago, we started off with the topic of France is more divided than ever, where we're looking into unemployment, terrorist attacks, etc. But let's move this forward. France, is it more divided than ever? Is the reason behind that because the runoff that we saw taking place yesterday, did that pit the most Europhile candidate against the most Europhobic candidate? Is that the reason behind it, or are there other reasons behind the division of France?
Well, to tell you the truth, of course, the political scene now in France is very divided and almost like balkanization. It comes from the fact that the extreme left as extreme right are, pleading against this globalization, which created uncertainty, which created unemployment. But on the other hand, on the topic of terrorism, of French unity, on, let's say, France is our fatherland and we should defend our fatherland, there is no balkanization, there is no division. And in fact, the main issue are on both items. That means how do we restore economic growth? And that's put the question of the straitjacket of Europe. And I think this is the main issue on which we will have real division.
Well, the division is one thing. Okay, if you want to say there is a balkanization of various regions, you could say in France, where there are little pockets here and pockets there, but globally, the French structure, the political structure is there. But we have to look into the fact that the turnout this time around was its lowest in 40 years. In 40 years, that's 12 million abstentions and 4.2 million spoiled ballots. That means that the 4.2 million people got out of bed yesterday and went to vote to not vote. What has to be done to actually reanimate the people who refuse to participate in the electoral process?
If I may,
I would like to actually, if I wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask Olivia that first.
Well, and it make a link with just your previous question. You're right, Mr. Millard, but I think that there is also a sociological issue in France. I mean that you get a lot of elderly people who doesn't vote the same like young people, and you get also young people. I mean, 34% of the young people in France didn't move yesterday. 35% of unemployed people didn't move yesterday. That is to say that there is kind of a France which is moving now. You get not more 2 forces, you get now 4 to 5 forces, because as you said, we can't do as if the 12% of people who didn't move yesterday, that's the 4 million people you're talking about, this is not a ghost, this is not nothing. And I would like to say that according to me, the next step, and it was a part of the election, is we get to think about how to give a new breeze to the institution. It's clearly a distrust of the institution, and I think that young people, millennials, are in part responsible of it.
Well, there's definitely reaction there, but I mean, if we can look into what's going to be happening next month, who can Macron count on now to be able to form a government? I mean, none of us have a silver bullet. Nobody has a magic wand to be able to say, right, in the next 5 years we can do all of this to make France a much more inclusive society. But let's just look to the next step forward here. On June 11th and June 18th, there are going to be legislative elections.
This is a question to be answered.
For the first time, it's going to be a president who has no political party behind him. What's going to happen? Is he going to be helped or stabbed in the back by Les Républicains?
That's the main issue, but the game is not over. And the game has not been played yet.
For who? For
anybody.
For anybody.
For anybody. But I would like to come on the first item, that it is to say that this is true that there's been a lot of abstention on the second round, but not on the first one. We had a huge participation, 84.
Yeah.
Remember that the US president is elected by less than 40%. So don't say that politics doesn't trust this nation. The French do like politics. So but this time it was very awkward because, of course, you had one Macron who is very particular and the extreme right. And it has been a vote against Marine Le Pen more than for Macron. But to come back, what will come now on next legislative election, there is a big question mark. It will depend how he will try to either try to draw to him some
Serenade.
Republicans, or if the Republicans stay together and that the French nation understand that, in fact, Mr. Macron has no genuine project, or he tried to circle the square, you see, because he's got left, he's got right supporters, and those people don't agree among themselves.
But do you believe the general resistance on the right wing, be it from Les Républicains or from Le Front National, that is the biggest challenge that he faces?
I think that he has also to change a challenge coming from the left, because if you look at Mélenchon said very clearly, first of all, he did not say if he voted for him, and secondly, he will present in each constituency a representative, a candidate. So, this is very true that you will have a split all over the place.
So,
Yeah, but
yes,
there is something
Olivia.
which would be interesting to underline. It's that it's kind of paradoxical situation, because Emmanuel Macron was elected with more voters than François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy. And at the same time, only, as you said, 43% of the people, of the voters, were for him. That is to say that he was not that bad elected. He was far more better elected than the two previous presidents.
Well, but still, the two previous presidents had an electoral, had a party machine behind them. I mean, you have Emmanuel Macron, who is looking to get a majority of the 570, within the 577 seats, which he himself has said that the candidates that will be put forward for the En Marche movement, half of them, 50%, will have no political experience. What will the French electorate, we're going into the nitty gritty here, who is going to actually get behind the En Marche in the legislative elections? I mean, we can say, okay,
The Socialist Party, of course.
we have Modem, we have François Bayrou, who has definitely put his weight behind them, but that isn't going to be enough to actually
You
form
get
a
a lot
government.
of questions in the same, but I think that, first of all, if you look history, never in the Fifth Republic the voters change between presidential and legislative. But I would say, above all, because of history, we should be very careful, because France is changing, just we've said. So we're not sure of anything. We're not sure you're going to have a majority. But if you look at the history, there can be a majority, which is not a majority of a party, which should be a majority of project, as they say, moving from the left and the right wing.
Now, just to move away from the as I said, the nitty gritty and the brass tacks that we're facing in the next month in the legislatives. In our previous roundtable, we wanted to get reaction from across the pond, across the Atlantic, and today we're joined on the line by Chris Ruddy, who's the CEO of Newsmax Media. Chris, you're on the line there. Can you hear us loud and clear?
I can hear you very loud and clear.
Well, excellent, Chris. Thanks for being on the program today. From your side of things, it would be good to ask you what kind of coverage the French elections actually received in the USA. I mean, how did Newsmax Media view the elections from afar?
Well, actually, we covered it very heavily. It's been the top lead for the past 2 days on Newsmax. And I know a lot of other media have been very interested in it, because they saw this election as perhaps part of what they call a wave election. We know in Brexit, there was a move to get out of the EU. It was a very surprising vote. We know that in the United States, President Trump won by surprise. There was a feeling that Le Pen was going to ride that wave, and she didn't. And that's a big story here. And because Trump has suggested that the Brexit vote actually helped him win the presidency. And so some people thought, well, maybe this is going to show a boost to him or whatever. I think the way the press here is treating this story is that it's a negative for Donald Trump and shows that perhaps his influence abroad is not as great as some people had thought.
Now, Chris, here, an interesting point there, but we also have to remember that Emmanuel Macron was endorsed last week. In the last few days, the final days, he was endorsed by former President Barack Obama. In your opinion, would that have any effect, or will that have any effect on how the Trump administration might deal with the centrist Macron?
I think President Trump we've seen is like he was very critical of China, and now he's, I was there that night, he met President Xi in Mar-a-Lago. I think he's very open-minded about building relationships. He always likes to tout himself as a deal maker. So if he can get Macron to do deals with him or join with him in certain areas, I don't think he's that invested in the Le Pen win. I think he was generally favorable to her winning, but I don't think he was emotionally, mentally that invested in her election. So I think he's very open to dealing with Macron.
Now, a question that I want to put to Olivier Grégoire here is, well, we have to look forward. I mean, Trump and Macron will be meeting at the at a NATO summit in about 2.5 weeks' time in Brussels, and then that's ahead of the G7 summit that's going to be happening in Italy. But let's look at Macron's style here. Now, he is going up against the big wigs. He's going up against the people like Trump. He's going up with these people such as Angela Merkel, well, with Angela Merkel, one would say, but does he intend to be this embodiment of the Republican guide of the nation? I mean, we had Hollande for 5 years, who was very much Monsieur
Normal.
Monsieur Normal, exactly, the president, the normal president. Do you think Macron is going to be pushing back to become a more statesman-like figure, back to the kind of days of Mitterrand or Chirac, one could say?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it began yesterday night. It began at the Louvre. It began with the two addresses he made to the people. And I think we don't go to the symbolism of the yesterday night by Emmanuel Macron at the Louvre, but he tries definitely to be very straight in the French history. And it would be a mistake, if you look at the images of yesterday, to think that he's just in the line of Mitterrand. Yesterday, the Louvre was far more a Republican symbol. It was also Valéry Giscard d'Estaing.
But the Sphinx built it, and that was Mitterrand. Maybe there was an element of that.
There is some papers very interesting to be read today in the French press. Look at the history with a global eyes, and it's not only Mitterrand. But what we saw yesterday is that he's at the moment at 39 years old. He is president. He is the youngest president. He do not have a lot of choices. He must embody the president. If he doesn't, he will fail. So it's also a question of non-verbal communication, of the way he walks, of the way he look at the people.
Well, we can see, I mean, what happened with when Hollande and Merkel had their first meeting, and she had to guide him across the red carpet, and that really kind of set the tone for a fumbling kind of presidency. So I think he understands the PR of making sure that it works on the first.
And first of all, he's used to. He's made a lot of that kind of thing before. He's used to. He knows how it works. And secondly, he knew it was the deal if he won. So he knew now that he got to play the game.
Well, I'm not so sure. In fact, this is a big question mark. You know, how is he going to behave in front of Trump? Yeah, and I'm glad that Trump knows where is France. Secondly, how is he going to behave against Putin, who is a tough man and can be very straight? I think he hasn't the experience of Merkel. So I think the first to do is to wait and see. And also that I'm sure yesterday night, I'm sorry to say, it was pathos, genuine pathos, and with a lot of symbolic, like, the Freemason triangle and things like that. So I'm sorry to say yesterday, nobody was impressed. It was almost grotesque.
But surely, but he knows how to make a splash. And literally, when he was resigning from the Ministry of the Economy, he actually went on the boat and had everybody following. So he knows how to play.
But imagine, David, one moment. Imagine if he didn't do that yesterday night, we would have said the opposite. That is to say, he tries to make the president normal.
No, it's not a question to be normal or not. But when you take the seat, as you have to really, deliver a speech which wasn't yesterday night above, very normal and pathetic words without any genuine political aim, etc. It was very pathetic.
So you thought it was shallow, basically. Is that
Yeah,
what you're
well,
saying?
it's grotesque.
Well, I just want to bring something that Olivia said earlier about that. How we might be interpreted from America. I'm back over to Chris from Newsmax Media in Florida. Chris, many people looking at France from the outside in to say, with all of the social welfare that we have and all of the healthcare that we have in place here, that everybody here takes for granted, that we're almost looked in some ways as a communist state. But I want to find out from your point of view, do people in the United States that you have met, especially you're in a place like Florida, do they actually know what Le Pen and her platform, that the platform that she stood upon, actually stands for here in Europe?
Well, I think that it's probably divided in America. The people that watch Fox News and more conservative Trump supporters probably felt that she was more simpatico with his worldview and a strong France, a strong national France, where the more left-leaning media like MSNBC here probably they portrayed her as supporting anti-Semitism, anti-immigration policies, being on the far right. And obviously a lot of people in France perceived her that way as well. It's also interesting, the whole Russian question's been a big issue. I know Hillary Clinton tweeted about it today, saying this was a win for democracy over influence meddling by Russia or other countries. And, there's a feeling among the left-leaning media in this country that the Russians unduly influenced the election. I personally don't think. I think it was outrageous what the Russians did, but at the end of the day, I don't think it was the reason why Hillary lost. But I'm curious to find out if you feel that in the French elections, that, as Hillary suggests, the French people really resented the Russian involvement, and that's one of the reasons that Macron won.
Jacques Maillard, what do you have to say to that?
This is pure rubbish. Chris is right. I mean, the Russian influence in the French election is null. I mean, zero. In fact, there was no influence.
Despite the hacking claims that came out on Friday?
Well,
Except a few fake news.
The last hackers on Friday night, it might have come also from United States. So be careful, be careful. Yeah. So, in fact, those hackings item did not influence at all French decision. I mean, when we had Le Pen and
that's not
then
for
Macron,
want of trying, surely. A lot of people did try.
Well,
whether
they
it does or does not
might have
influence,
tried,
people
but
have tried.
it hasn't worked, because in fact the French media did not publish anything or almost anything. It was just on the network that some links linked. But also, I would say that at the point that you have Le Pen and you have Macron, and the point is that all others did not want of Le Pen, so it was a vote against Le Pen and not
protest vote,
and not only on a protest vote, but to stop her and not in favor of Macron.
Well, we've got over that, and then I think that comes out in various ways. However, it wants to be, you want to break it down. But let's go back to what Chris Ruddy was saying there, and over to you, Olivia. I mean, as a strategist, as somebody who knows how things go, Marine Le Pen is fighting she wants to change the Front National into the largest opposition party here in France. She wants to do that in the next 5 years. What will she need to do, and what skeletons in the closet does she need to get rid of to make her party a viable political force here in France?
Big job.
It's a big job and huge question. She said yesterday that she wants to change a few things in the party. She began to talk about changing the name and blah, blah, blah. We were talking about this with Mr. Mia a few seconds before. Changing a name is kind of makeup. It doesn't change the program, so it's kind of Ripollin. But what was weird yesterday night is that, first of all, she was very happy. She looks very happy. We get some video showing her dancing with his team, etc. She was less than 35%. I just remember it was very low according to what she was waiting. And according to the fact that she was waiting to double the score of his daddy, for her daddy, a few years ago. But what was weird is that when you listen to the team like Marion Maréchal Le Pen,
her niece,
her niece, exactly. A few minutes after, yesterday night, she said that she did not understand exactly what Marine Le Pen wants to say when she says that she's going to move a little bit the party. The fact is that there is a struggle
Within the party.
Within the party, and that they spend their time trying to show that there is no problem. But the fact is that the National Front is like the other party. You get different currents. You get the left, you get the right, you get Philippot, who is quite social, and you get also Marion Maréchal Le Pen, who is at the right of the National Front. I guess that there will be a question for Florian Philippot. You're going to have a few problem and turbulences, I think, in the coming months. And I think also that it's interesting to, and perhaps to ask to Mr. Millard, that it's moving also on the right wing. You get only 56% of the people who vote for François Fillon, who vote yesterday for Emmanuel Macron, and you get more than 20% of the Republicans who vote for the National Front yesterday. So there should be a question about what the right of the right wing is going to be. Will the Republicans split off between centrism, independent Republican, and right, strong Republican? There should be a new National Front with and Nicolas Dupont-Aignan, of course, but also with some more conservative coming from the Republican.
Well, on that point, back over to you, Jacques Millard. You are a membre de l'Assemblée. You're an MP for Yvelines. François Fillon, only a few weeks ago, just said he has no longer the legitimacy to lead the party into the legislative elections. Under whose banner are the Républicains going in under?
That will be, and it is going to be François Baroin, there is no doubt. The fact is that it's very true that there will be not a split. But I think what we need in the Républicains is a new project, an ideological project. I personally believe that we need a strong RPR at the time of, Chirac at the beginning. And I think the mistake was to merge with very liberals. They have their place, but I think it was in fact a mistake to try to merge everything and to go in the middle of the political scene. I do believe that if we had to do our work, there will be no National Front. And this is the point. We can regain the National Front, not the ideology, but the people who voted for them.
Okay, Jacques Millard, thank you very much. Olivier Grégoire, we've only got 30 seconds left. I would like to thank you both and Chris Ruddy on the other side of the Atlantic there in Florida for joining me on the program today. We actually have to cut it a little bit short. Loads of questions to ask. We're going to have to get you back on. From everybody here at Paris Live PM this Monday following the presidential elections yesterday. Thank you to all the team here on RFI English. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.